The Conservatives have seen another high-profile defection to reform over the weekend. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I take the view it's obviously disappointing when people defect, but I think in recent weeks Kemi has shown amazing leadership. She was very strong in the way she dealt with Robert Jenrick's defection. She set out some amazingly positive policies in recent weeks, and I was particularly pleased that she isn't going to be drawn into this sort of really angry, battle to be angry about broken Britain, as it's called. We have our challenges as a country, no doubt. There are big issues we need to sort out, but I'm glad she wants to be positive and she's going to focus on setting out an alternative vision to Labour.
And how many more do you think are to come? Are you expecting more?
I haven't a clue, and I hope there won't be any more. Obviously, it's impossible for me to say that. My concern at the moment, these are serious times. We've got some really big issues to deal with. Defence, from my point of view in particular, with instability in the world, the economy, and of course what's happening with President Trump and so on.
And given the events of last week, Robert Jenrick's defection, what's the current mood in the party?
Actually, in all honesty, putting the defections to one side, because essentially when they go, they've gone. I think the party hasn't been this united for a long time. We had our shadow cabinet away day. It was very upbeat. It's obviously disappointing that Robert spoke publicly about what we discussed privately, but that's his choice. I think the really important thing is that Kemi is starting to set out a really authentic message. If you take the substance, at the moment the country is spending way too much on welfare, and Labour incredibly have taken the decision to continue increasing that when we all know, everyone, we've got to spend more on defence. So I'm pleased that she's shown the leadership to make those sorts of difficult decisions and judgments, and I think that's why I think actually it's pretty upbeat.
But it looks like Nigel Farage is trying to replace the Conservatives now. It seems quite clear that he's trying to do that. Does that mean that any sort of deal with reform is completely off the table now?
I don't think he's trying to replace the Conservatives. He seems to be recruiting quite a lot of people who used to be Conservatives. And I'm bound to point out, if he thinks what we did in government is so bad, why is he recruiting people who were, Conservative throughout that time? And I think that the key issue here is, of course, reform leading the polls, etc. But come the general election, there will have to be a party somewhere that can run the country, that has a plan to balance the books, that has the trust of the financial markets and is sensible and has well thought out policies. And for me, that will be us under Kemi's leadership. It won't happen overnight, but we've started that progress. We're certainly doing a lot better than we were, but still I accept trailing reform. But I think, this is a bit of a marathon, not a sprint. And from my point of view, I'm actually really positive about where the party is, because we're seeing real authentic Conservative policies as an alternative to a failing Labour government.
And the PM is expected to address the nation shortly today about the US imposing tariffs on the UK, this issue over the sovereignty of Greenland. Do you think it's important that we stand up to President Trump here?
I think it's absolutely critical that, on something where I think everyone in British politics pretty much agrees, we do send a strong message to him. Robust diplomacy. This is not acceptable on two counts. First of all, the claim to Greenland, which is part of a sovereign Denmark nation, a friend of ours, friend of the United States and a fellow NATO member. And secondly, the threat of tariffs for countries that stand up to that. I mean, it's totally unacceptable. And I think that, I hope that the wider American public, congressmen, etc., recognise that, and of course the administration. So look, we mustn't get ahead of ourselves. President Trump has come out with things before and then taken a different course. The key here is to engage as closely as possible. So I'm pleased that the Prime Minister has spoken to him, but we need much more of that engagement. Because I think here in Parliament, I think there's strong unity that he's doing the wrong thing here, President Trump.
And further on Greenland, your brief is defence. We've sent a British officer to join the NATO Arctic Sentry mission.
Yes.
Should the UK think about stationing more troops or military assets on the island?
I don't think we need to have that conversation at the moment. This is not a military situation. Of course, there's the wider question of security and what we call the High North, the Arctic, the threat from Russia. We need to increase defence spending to address that and many other aspects of defence. The question here is a political one. We have the president of a NATO member threatening tariffs against countries who are NATO members as well. If they question the fact that he's exerting his right to another NATO country, that's unacceptable. So I think this has to be resolved politically, and I actually think, I still hope that the US will see sense on this, President Trump. I just think, above all, it's not in his interest. It's not in our interest. It would be damaging for us and for the US if there was any kind of sort of trade war or certainly, escalation of tariffs. That would be damaging for US consumers, UK consumers and businesses. And so I hope that, he steps back, and we need to exert all possible diplomatic pressure to that endeavour.
President Trump is making the argument that this is in their interest, this is in the US national interest, that they need Greenland for national security.
Yeah.
Do you buy that argument? And if you don't, what do you think maybe the real reason is behind this posturing?
Well, I don't speak for the President. I mean, the national security issue here is that we are part of NATO. It's a very strong alliance. Just remember, the only time Article 5 has ever been used was when 9/11 and the United States used Article 5 so that other countries would come to their mutual defence because they've been hit in the war on terror. And if you recall, in Afghanistan, which was part of the war on terror, Denmark had the highest losses per capita, incredibly. We obviously lost a lot of soldiers as well. It was a real fight to go after the Taliban and those who'd masterminded that attack, and we did it as one alliance. That's how we have to be. That's how we're strong, and that's why I think it's not in the US national interest.
And just last one from me, your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, was at the protest outside the site of the new proposed Chinese embassy on the weekend. Do you believe if that was to go ahead, that would be a threat to UK national security?
Yes, I do. I thought she made an amazing, inspiring speech, which to me showed, the real strength of Kemi as a leader. And she's absolutely right. Of course, it's a threat to national security. We should be questioning every aspect of this proposal. I do worry. I think that on this, the Prime Minister's weak. Today, we basically agree with him on Greenland and what the President of the United States is proposing. But really, on the Chinese embassy, Labour needs to think again.
The word that we need to use is unprecedented. This idea that the United States is now threatening its European allies with economic tariffs explicitly over its desire to get control over Greenland. It's one thing if there is, threats of tariffs back and forth over the Atlantic, over disagreements over trade practices and regulations. That's sort of, normal to some extent. But to have the tariffs, the tariffs and the threat of tariffs motivated by a desire to acquire territory from one of the US's treaty allies, I think that is completely unprecedented. And to be honest, a little outrageous, and that's of course why we're seeing the response from European countries saying enough is enough. This is one bridge too far for us, and this time we can't just give in to Trump's demands. We're going to have to try and stand our ground. The governments are realizing we have to put our foot down, otherwise this will never end. We got to meet his aggression, his threats with some amount of pushback and strength. Otherwise, we know how he responds to weakness. I mean, the economic weapon is the best option Europe has. So tariffs directed back at Trump, if they're smart, probably directed at, Trump's allies, tech people in Silicon Valley, find a way to try and hit the people that are Trump's support base rather than some of the demographics of the states that are already against Trump on this matter. That, of course, can be difficult, but we'll see. I mean, the EU has the ability to really strike back with force if they want to, and it'll hurt European economies, it'll hurt American economies. The challenge for Trump is he has midterms coming up, and it's not going to help him if the US goes into more of an economic recession or more of an economic turmoil than is already the case.